Have you ever wondered why life keeps throwing one problem after another at you? Those days when it feels like the whole world is against you, work suffocates you, relationships drain you, or there's just an unexplainable emptiness. What if I told you those problems aren't your enemies, but secret allies trying to guide you toward a better version of yourself? Would you believe me? I'm your name. And today we're diving into a life-changing idea from Carl Jung, a psychologist who peered deep into the human soul and found a way to turn suffering into strength. This isn't just a video, it's a journey, and I promise if you stick with me to the end, you won't just see your problems differently, you'll see yourself differently. Picture this: you're standing before a door, and on the other side is the answer to the question you've been avoiding your whole life. Who am I really? Do you dare open it? Let's find out. Let's start with a story. A few years ago, I was living in Chicago, working in a sleek downtown office with windows overlooking the river. From the outside, my life looked perfect. A steady job, a cute apartment in Lakeview, and Friday nights eating tacos with friends in Wicker Park. But inside, I felt like I was dying. Every morning I woke up with a heaviness like a rock on my chest. I blamed everything: my demanding boss, fake co-workers, even Chicago's weather drove me nuts. But then, one day, I stumbled across a quote from Carl Jung. Everything you experience, whether joy or pain, comes from within you. It hit me like a punch to the face. I realized the problem wasn't my job or the city. The problem was me. I was living a life that wasn't mine, chasing what society said would make me happy, a prestigious job, a packed schedule. But I'd never stopped to ask, what makes me feel alive? Jung believed our problems, those moments that make you want to give up, aren't random. They're messages encoded deep within your soul trying to tell you something vital. Think about the last time you felt stuck. Maybe you were in a draining relationship like my friend Emily in Seattle. Emily dated a guy named Ryan for 3 years. He wasn't awful, but he always made her feel like she wasn't good enough. She thought the problem was Ryan, his constant busyness, his rare listening. But when she started reading Jung, she realized something painful. Ryan was a mirror, reflecting how she saw herself. Growing up, her parents always compared her to her siblings, and she carried that not enough feeling into every relationship. The problem wasn't Ryan, it was her unhealed wound. When Emily started working on herself through journaling, meditation, and even therapy, she didn't just leave Ryan. She began to love herself. And the magic 6 months later, she met someone new who made her feel truly valued. This brings us to a core Jungian concept, the shadow. The shadow is all the parts of you that you don't want to admit exist. It's the anger you suppress when someone cuts you off on I-95. It's the fear of failure that stops you from applying for that dream job in San Francisco. It's even the talents you bury, like telling yourself I'm not good enough to open a bakery in Brooklyn even though your cookies have the whole neighborhood raving. I used to think my shadow was something shameful, like a dirty secret to hide. But Jung said the shadow isn't your enemy. It's part of you, and when you ignore it, it finds ways to sneak out through unexplained outbursts or moments you sabotage yourself. Let me tell you about Tom, a guy I met at a workshop in Austin. Tom was a software engineer in Silicon Valley making tons of money. But he wasn't happy. He told me that every time he got promoted, he'd find ways to mess things up, showing up late to meetings, ignoring important emails. He didn't know why. But as we talked, he realized deep down he didn't believe he deserved success. As a kid, his dad always said, "Don't dream too big, you'll fall hard." Tom's shadow was the fear that his dad was right. When he started facing that fear through writing his thoughts and talking to a therapist, he didn't just stop sabotaging himself. He began leading major projects, and for the first time he felt proud of himself. "So, how do you face your shadow?" Jung said. "The first step is to notice. The next time you feel a strong emotion like envy when a coworker gets a raise, or rage when friends cancel plans to see a Yankees game, don't push it away. Pause, breathe, ask yourself, what's this feeling trying to tell me? What part of me have I been ignoring?" I tried this once when I was annoyed about a friend bragging about his Hawaii vacation. At first I thought I was just mad because he was loud, but digging deeper I realized I was jealous because I hadn't let myself rest. I was so busy chasing work that I forgot to enjoy life. My shadow was screaming, "Live a little," but it's not just about negative emotions. Your shadow also holds forgotten gifts. Think about Rachel, a banker in Boston. Rachel always dreamed of being a painter, but told me I'm not talented enough. Painting's just a silly hobby. She buried that dream in her shadow, fearing judgment. But one day she joined a local art class just for fun. She started painting scenes of Cape Cod's coast, and they were so stunning that a gallery in Provincetown invited her to exhibit. Now she sells paintings part-time and says she's never felt so alive. Rachel's shadow wasn't just fear. It was the talent she'd denied for too long. Now imagine you start listening to your shadow. What happens, Jung said, that when you embrace all parts of yourself, light and dark, you begin to become whole. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. And when you're real, magic happens. Your relationships shift. Opportunities you thought were impossible start appearing. That's what Jung called synchronicity moments when the universe seems to work for you. I remember a time in Denver when I was wrestling with whether to move to a new city. I felt terrified, like I was standing on a cliff. One day I was walking past an old bookstore in Capitol Hill, and a book fell off the shelf right in front of me. It was a Jung book open to a page about trusting your path. I bought it, and as I read it, felt like it was speaking to me. Days later, I met a stranger at a coffee shop who told me about a job opportunity in the city I was considering. These coincidences weren't random. They were signs I was on the right track. Jung said when you listen to your soul, the universe responds. Think about a synchronicity moment in your life. Maybe you thought of an old friend and they texted you right then. Or you found an online article saying exactly what you needed to hear. These moments remind you that you're not alone. Your soul and the world around you are in conversation, guiding you further. But to notice them, you have to be still. In America, we're caught in a frantic pace, checking emails over breakfast, scrolling TikTok on the New York subway. But Jung said intuition, that small inner voice, is your superpower. It's not based on logic or data. It comes from a deeper place that knows what you need before you do. I learned to listen to my intuition in a simple way. Every night I spend 10 minutes sitting quietly, no phone, no Netflix. I just breathe and ask, what did I miss today? What's my heart trying to say? Once I realized I was avoiding a tough conversation with a friend in Los Angeles. I was scared of hurting her, but my intuition told me honesty would help us both. I called her, and though the talk wasn't easy, it saved our friendship. Intuition isn't always right, but it's always worth hearing. Jung also believed dreams are your soul's way of talking to you. Think about Lisa, a teacher in Minneapolis. Lisa kept dreaming she was standing in front of an old house with locked doors. She didn't get it until she read Jung and realized the house symbolized her mind. The locked doors were fears she hadn't faced, like her fear of leaving a stable job to open a yoga studio. She started journaling her dreams, and over time she saw they were pushing her to change. She quit her job, trained as a yoga instructor in Colorado, and now runs a small studio in Uptown. Lisa said, "My dreams weren't just random images, they were a map to myself." But this journey isn't just about you. Jung believed we're all connected through something called the collective unconscious, a shared reservoir of symbols and stories humans have carried for centuries. Think about the fairy tales you heard as a kid, the hero slaying a dragon, or the kind fairy godmother. These aren't just entertainment. They're archetypes, deep patterns that live in us all. When you face a big challenge like moving to a new city or rising after a breakup, you're living the hero's archetype. You're fighting your own dragon, whether it's fear or doubt. Let me tell you about Mike, a veteran in Phoenix. Mike came back from Afghanistan with PTSD, feeling like he didn't belong anywhere. He drank to forget, but it only made things worse. One day, he joined a support group at a community center, and a mentor told him about Jung and archetypes. Mike realized he was living in his shadow pain and guilt from the war. But he also saw he had the hero archetype within. He started writing about his experiences, and those stories became a memoir. The book didn't just heal him, it inspired hundreds of other veterans. Mike said, "I didn't slay the dragon, but I learned to live with it." The journey to wholeness, Jung said, is about embracing every part of you, light and dark, strength and vulnerability. It's not about never having problems. It's about facing them with courage and clarity. Think about Sarah, a social worker in Philadelphia. Sarah always felt she had to be strong for her family, especially after her mom died. She worked 60-hour weeks, cared for her siblings, and never complained. But she started having panic attacks and didn't know why. Through therapy, she learned she'd buried her grief in her shadow. When she started crying, really letting herself feel the pain, she didn't just heal. She became a better sister, a better friend. She said, "I used to think weakness was failure. Now I know it's strength." So, what about you? What problem in your life is trying to tell you something? Maybe it's the job you hate in Dallas, where you sit in an office all day, staring out the window, dreaming of another life. Maybe it's the relationship you're clinging to in Miami, even though you know it's unhealthy. Or maybe it's the dream you gave up, like opening a coffee shop in Portland serving lattes with heart-shaped foam. These problems aren't dead ends. They're invitations, and I know facing them is scary. I've been there. When I decided to leave Chicago to pursue my passion for content creation, I was terrified. Friends called me crazy, family worried, but deep down I knew it was my path, and every step I took, however small, made me feel more alive. Jung said life isn't about avoiding pain. It's about learning, growing, and transforming through it. Think about the toughest moments in your life, a breakup, a failure, a loss. In the moment, it might have felt like the end. But looking back, don't you see how they shaped you? They made you stronger, wiser, maybe more compassionate. That's the power of transformation. Every crisis is a chance to be reborn. Let me tell you about Anna, a single mom in Charlotte. Anna lost her job during the pandemic and fell into depression. She felt she'd failed her 10-year-old son who loved basketball. But one day she found a Jung book at the local library. She started reading about individuation, the journey to become your true self. Anna realized she'd spent her life pleasing others, her parents, her ex-husband, even neighbors. She started doing small things for herself, joining a dance class at the community center, writing a blog about her journey. Those posts went viral, and she was invited to speak at a conference in Raleigh. Now, Anna runs a support group for single moms, saying, "I thought I'd lost everything, but I found myself." As you begin this journey, you'll see everything is connected. The people you meet, the events that happen, they're all part of a bigger story. Jung called this synchronicity, like the universe sending you clues. Think about James, a student in Los Angeles. James was struggling to choose a major at UCLA. He felt pressure to study business because his family wanted him to succeed, but he loved writing screenplays. One day he met a filmmaker at a Silver Lake coffee shop. The filmmaker read James's script and invited him to work on a short project. That was the synchronicity that changed his life. James is now a screenwriter saying, "The universe knew what I needed before I did." So how do you invite these synchronicity moments? Start by trusting your intuition. In America, we're taught everything must make sense. You need plans, data charts. But Jung said intuition is how your soul guides you. Try this the next time you face a decision like whether to take a new job in Seattle. Don't just rely on pros and cons lists. Sit quietly, close your eyes, and ask, how does this choice feel in my body? Does it excite me or scare me? Your intuition will answer if you listen. And don't forget your dreams. Jung said dreams are your unconscious sending you letters. Think about David, a lawyer in Miami. David dreamed he was running through a forest, chased by a wolf. He woke up heart-pounding, wondering what it meant. Reading Jung, he realized the wolf was his shadow, his fear of being trapped in a life that wasn't his. He loved music, but gave up guitar when he went to law school. That dream pushed him to buy a guitar again and start playing at local bars. Now he has a small band saying, "I didn't just find music, I found joy." This journey isn't easy. Some days you'll want to give up when facing your shadow feels too painful. But I promise it's worth it. Every step you take, every time you choose to be honest with yourself, makes you stronger. You start living a life that reflects the real you. And the best part, your change isn't just for you, it ripples. When you live authentically, you inspire others to do the same. Think about Maria, a chef in New Orleans. Maria hid that she was gay, fearing her family's rejection. But when she started living her truth, telling people, loving who she loved, she didn't just find happiness. She became a role model for her niece, who was struggling with her own identity. Maria said, "I didn't just change my life. I helped others feel they could too." So what will you choose? Will you keep running from your problems, or will you pause? Listen and let them guide you to a better you. I'm not saying it'll be easy. There'll be days you doubt when your shadow feels too big, when your intuition whispers things you don't want to hear. But every small step, every time you face your fear, every time you listen to your soul is a victory. And those victories add up, creating a life not just worth living, but worth sharing. Think about this right now. A part of you is waiting to be seen. Maybe it's a dream you buried, like opening a bookstore in Savannah. Maybe it's pain you've suppressed, like grief from a breakup in Nashville. Or maybe it's strength you haven't claimed, like leading a project at your Denver company. That part of you is knocking. Will you open the door? I believe you can. And I'm here with thousands of other viewers cheering you on. Share your story in the comments. What problem are you facing, and what small step will you take today to listen to your soul? Your story might be the spark someone needs to start their journey. And if you haven't subscribed, do it now. We're building a community of people daring to live authentically, and I want you in it. Thank you for being here. You're not just a viewer, you're a change maker. Keep walking your path, and I'll see you in the next video. Let me share one more moment that changed how I see everything. After leaving Chicago, I moved to Portland, Oregon, hoping for a fresh start. I thought a new city with tree-lined streets and indie coffee shops in the Pearl District would fix all my problems. But guess what? My problems didn't stay in Chicago. They followed me like an invisible suitcase full of fears and doubts. I landed a new job as a content creator for a startup, but within months, that familiar heaviness returned, empty, weighed down. I started wondering, did I make a mistake? Will I ever be enough to live the life I want? Then one night, curled up on my couch with a mug of tea, scrolling Instagram, I stumbled across a post about a Jung workshop at a nearby community center. The post had a quote, "Your shadow isn't something to fear, it's your teacher." My heart skipped. That was the moment I knew I had to go. The workshop was in a small room in southeast Portland with mint green walls and the smell of fresh coffee. The facilitator, Clara, had silver hair and eyes that seemed to see through you. She talked about Jung's shadow, not in a dry textbook way, but like it was alive. She said, "Your shadow is like an old friend you've forgotten standing at your door knocking. If you let it in, it'll tell you secrets about yourself." She asked us to write about a moment we felt ashamed or angry and dig into what it was hiding. I thought of a time I argued with a new coworker, Jake, at my job. Jake always criticized my ideas in meetings, and once I snapped at him in front of the team. I felt embarrassed, thinking I'd lost control. But as I wrote, I realized something shocking. I wasn't really mad at Jake. I was mad at myself. Jake was a mirror for my fear that I wasn't good enough, that I was a fraud in this creative job. My shadow was screaming, and I'd blamed him. Here's the twist: Clara didn't stop at writing. She had us role-play our shadow in an exercise. I had to stand in front of the group, pretend to be my fear of not being enough, and say what it wanted. I was shaking, my heart pounding, but I did it. I stood there looking at strangers and said, "I'm the fear you'll fail. I keep you safe by making you doubt yourself, but I'm also holding you back." That moment was like an explosion in my mind. I realized my shadow didn't want to hurt me. It was trying to protect me in its warped way. When I sat down, Clara smiled and said, "Now that you've seen it, you can work with it." I left that workshop with a strange relief, like I'd unlocked an invisible chain. But the story doesn't end there. A few weeks later, I got an email from Jake, the coworker I'd clashed with. He apologized for his behavior, but revealed something that floored me. He was jealous of me. He said, "Your ideas are always more creative than mine," and I felt like I couldn't keep up. I couldn't believe it. The guy I thought was my enemy was battling his own shadow, the same fear of not being enough. We met at a coffee shop in Hawthorne, and for the first time we talked honestly. He told me about growing up in a small Ohio town where everyone said he'd never amount to much. I shared my fears, how I always felt I had to prove something. That conversation didn't just mend our relationship. It taught me a huge Jungian lesson. The people who irritate you most are often mirrors for the parts of you you haven't accepted. This leads me to another story about a woman named Hannah in San Diego. Hannah was a freelance journalist living in a small apartment near La Jolla's beach. She loved her work, but had a problem: she couldn't stop comparing herself to other journalists. Every time she saw a colleague's viral Twitter post, she felt like a failure. She told me, "I know I'm good, but I can't stop thinking I'll never be enough to compete." Hannah stumbled into an online Jung course and discovered the concept of projection. Jung said we project what we don't accept in ourselves onto others. Hannah realized she wasn't really jealous of those journalists. She was jealous of herself, the confident, risk-taking version she'd buried. She grew up with a critical mom who said she was too dreamy to succeed. Hannah's shadow was the fear her mom was right. Here's the drama. Hannah didn't just stop at realization. She decided to face her shadow with a bold move. She pitched an article to a major New York newspaper, something she'd delayed for years, fearing rejection. She told me I was shaking when I hit send, but I told myself if I fail, at least I tried. A week later, she got a reply. Not just a polite rejection. The paper wanted to publish her piece and offered her a monthly column. Hannah nearly fell off her chair reading that email. She said, "I realized my shadow wasn't as powerful as I thought. It was only big because I kept running from it." Now, Hannah's a beloved writer at that paper, saying she didn't just find a career, she found freedom. Hannah's story makes me think of another Jung concept: individuation. This is the journey to become your true self, not the version society wants. In America, we're obsessed with success: a big house in suburban Atlanta, a shiny SUV, an Instagram with thousands of likes. But Jung said real success isn't external. It's finding what makes you feel alive and daring to live it, no matter how scary. I remember meeting a guy named Brian at a Nashville bar. Brian was a musician who quit playing 10 years ago to work in insurance. He told me I gave up guitar because I thought I needed stability, but every day I felt like I was dying. One night he dreamed he was on stage playing guitar to thousands. He woke up crying, realizing it was a call from his soul. Brian did something crazy. He signed up for an open mic in East Nashville despite not playing in a decade. He said I was shaking so bad I nearly dropped my guitar. But when he started singing a song he wrote about his youth, the room went silent. When he finished, the crowd wouldn't stop clapping. A music producer happened to be there and invited Brian to record a single. That wasn't the moment Brian became a star. It was the moment he returned to himself. Now Brian plays music part-time, saying, "I'm not rich, but I feel richer than ever." Brian's story reminds us that individuation isn't a straight line. Some days you'll feel off track when your shadow screams you're not good enough, that you should quit. That's when you need to remember another Jung quote: "What you resist persists. What you embrace transforms." I learned this the hard way. After Portland, I moved to Austin thinking I'd finally figured it out. I started a YouTube channel sharing about psychology and growth, but then I hit a new problem: fear of judgment. Every time I posted a video, I obsessed over negative comments. One person wrote, "Who needs this cliched nonsense?" and I felt like the world was mocking me. I almost quit. But then I remembered Clara's exercise in Portland. I decided to face my shadow fear of rejection. I made a new video, more honest than ever, sharing times I felt like a failure. I talked about nights I cried in my Chicago apartment days. I doubted every choice. I hit post, thinking, if they hate this, at least I was real. But what happened? That video became my most watched. Hundreds commented saying they felt connected, that they'd felt the same. One wrote, "Thank you for giving me courage to face my own fears." That moment I realized my shadow wasn't just fear. It was the door to real connection with others. Here's a bigger twist. Among those viewers was Jessica, a podcast producer in Los Angeles. Jessica reached out saying she wanted me on her show, a personal growth podcast with millions of listeners. I couldn't believe it. But when I got to her Hollywood studio, I learned something even more shocking. Jessica was a Jung fan too, and found my channel through a synchronicity. She said she was looking for a new guest, and a friend sent her my video link just as she was reading a Jung book. We sat in the studio talking about the shadow synchronicity and individuation, and that episode inspired thousands to start their own journeys. Jessica told me after the recording, "You didn't just share your story. You helped me share mine." This makes me think of one final Jung concept, the collective unconscious. This is the idea that we're all connected through a deep reservoir of stories and symbols. Think about your favorite movies like The Matrix or Star Wars. They're not just entertainment. They're hero stories about facing darkness and finding light. These resonate because they tap into the collective unconscious. When you face your shadow, you're not just doing it for you. You're adding to humanity's bigger story. Let me tell you about one last person, a woman named Lauren in Miami. Lauren was a lawyer working 80-hour weeks at a big firm in Brickell. She had everything society calls success, a penthouse, a Mercedes Bahamas vacations. But she told me I felt like I was living someone else's life. One day, she had a car accident on I-95. Not serious, but enough to make her pause. While waiting for a tow truck, she saw a billboard, "Whose life are you living?" It felt like a sign from the universe. She started reading Jung and learned about synchronicity. She realized the accident wasn't random. It was a wake-up call. Lauren did something bold. She quit her job, sold her penthouse, and moved to a small town in the Florida Keys. She opened a meditation center teaching mindfulness and Jungian psychology. Here's the twist. Among her first students was Robert, a high school friend she'd lost touch with for decades. Robert found her center through a weird coincidence, a local newspaper article about her he read while waiting at an airport. Robert was also battling his shadow fear he'd wasted his life in a job he hated. Together, Lauren and Robert began a healing journey, not just for themselves, but for their community. Lauren's center is now a place where hundreds come to explore their souls, and she says, "I used to think success was having it all. Now I know it's being it all." So what about you? What will you choose today? Will you keep running from your shadow, or will you stop? Look at it and ask, what do you want me to learn? I know it's scary. I've been there in those long nights in Portland, wondering if I was strong enough to keep going. But I promise every step brings you closer to your true self. And when you live authentically, you don't just change your life. You change the world around you. Share your story in the comments. What problem is knocking at your soul, and what will you do to answer? Your story could be the light someone needs. And if you haven't subscribed, do it now. We're a community of dreamers, facers, and livers. Thank you for being here. Keep your journey going, and I'll see you in the next video. Let me take you back to Austin, where my story took unexpected turns. After the podcast success with Jessica in Los Angeles, I thought I'd cracked life. I felt like I was flying, like every piece of my soul had found its place. But life has a way of humbling you. A few months later, I got an email from a YouTube viewer, a girl named Chloe in Denver. Chloe wrote that my shadow video changed how she saw life, but she was facing a secret she'd never dared share. She asked if I'd meet her to talk, saying, "I feel like you're the only one who'd understand." I was curious, but nervous. I'm not a therapist, just a storyteller finding my way. But something in Chloe's message, desperation mixed with hope, made me say yes. I flew to Denver on a fall day with maple trees in Washington Park blazing red. Chloe met me at a cozy Rhino coffee shop with exposed brick walls and the smell of fresh waffles. She was 25 with dyed green hair and eyes both fierce and fragile. After small talk about Colorado weather, she took a deep breath and said, "I've lived a lie my whole life." My heart raced. She explained she grew up in a conservative Wyoming town where her family demanded she be perfect straight-A student, obedient, and never different. But Chloe had a secret: she was transgender. She'd known since childhood, but buried it in her shadow, fearing rejection from family and community. She said, "I lived as someone else to be loved." But I can't anymore. I listened, feeling a deep connection. I thought of my own shadow, fear of rejection, of not belonging. But Chloe's story was bigger. She shared that 2 years earlier she'd attempted suicide in Cheyenne. She survived, and that moment was a wake-up call. She started reading Jung and realized her shadow, her true identity, was screaming to be acknowledged. She said, "Your video about facing the shadow gave me courage to tell the truth. But I'm scared living authentically will cost me everything." I didn't know what to say. I just held her hand and said, "You're not alone, and your truth is worth more than any fear." Here's the twist. When Chloe started living authentically, she didn't lose everything. She found a new family. She moved to Denver, joined a transgender support group, and began working at a nonprofit helping LGBTQ youth. But the most shocking part was her family's response. At first, her parents refused to talk to her, but a year later, her mom, Susan, drove from Wyoming to Denver. Over a tearful dinner at an Italian restaurant in Lodo, Susan apologized. She said, "I was wrong to force you to be someone you're not. I just wanted you safe, but I hurt you." Chloe and her mom began healing now, talking weekly. Chloe told me I thought living my truth would ruin my life. It brought me closer to my mom than ever. Chloe's story makes me think of another Jung concept rebirth. Jung said every time you face your shadow, you go through a psychological rebirth. You shed an old version of yourself limited by fear society's expectations and become someone new. I saw this in myself, but Chloe's story is a vivid testament. She didn't just survive, she bloomed. She started a blog about her journey, which spread across Colorado. A Boulder publisher reached out, and now she's writing a book about finding identity in a judgmental world. Chloe said, "I used to think my shadow was a curse. Now I know it's my greatest gift." But my Denver story doesn't end there. As I left the coffee shop with Chloe, I got a text from Jessica, the LA podcast producer. She said our episode was nominated for a National Podcast Award, and she wanted me to fly to New York for the ceremony. I nearly dropped my phone. New York, an award. Me, the guy who thought he'd be stuck in a Chicago office forever, invited to a Manhattan event. But when I got there at a glitzy midtown theater with crystal chandeliers and a red carpet, I learned something even more shocking. One of the presenters was Clara, the Portland workshop facilitator. I couldn't believe my eyes. Clara, with her silver hair and warm smile, took the stage, and when she saw me in the crowd, she winked. After the ceremony, I ran to her and she said, "See, the universe always knows how to arrange things." Another synchronicity, a reminder my journey wasn't random. Here's the drama. At the ceremony, I met Ethan, a Brooklyn documentary filmmaker. Ethan was making a film about Jung and how his ideas are changing lives in America. He'd heard my podcast and wanted to interview me for the film. I agreed, and weeks later I flew to his Williamsburg studio. During filming, Ethan shared his own story, one that gave me chills. He grew up in a tough Detroit neighborhood, witnessing violence as a kid. He said I buried that pain in my shadow, and it made me an angry person. He'd been a successful director, but ruined his career with outbursts and fights with producers. One day, he found a Jung book in a Greenwich Village bookstore, and it changed everything. He started facing his shadow childhood pain, suppressed anger. He said I realized I wasn't mad at the world. I was mad at myself for letting my past define me. Ethan did something bold. He quit commercial directing and started making documentaries about psychological healing. The Jung film was his passion project, and he said interviewing me was a synchronicity. He shared, "I prayed for someone who could tell Jung's story authentically, and then I heard your podcast." Ethan's film later screened at Sundance, winning the Audience Award. But what shocked me most was when he invited me on stage at the Park City, Utah premiere. Before hundreds, he said, "This guy isn't just a storyteller. He's living proof Jung's ideas can change lives." I stood there, tears streaming, feeling like the universe was hugging me. Ethan's story makes me think of another Jung idea, meaning. Jung said life's ultimate goal isn't happiness, but meaning. In America, we're obsessed with feeling good, buying a new iPhone, vacationing in Hawaii, posting a perfect Instagram pic. But Jung said meaning comes from facing your darkness, finding your unique path in the world. I saw this in Ethan, Chloe, and myself. But I also saw it in Mia, a girl in Seattle. Mia was a programmer at a big tech firm in South Lake Union. She earned 6 figures, lived in a luxe apartment overlooking Puget Sound, but told me I felt like I was in a golden cage. Growing up in a working-class Tacoma neighborhood, she always felt she had to prove she was good enough to escape. Her shadow was the fear she'd never truly belong in the glitzy tech world. She said I always felt like an imposter, like one day they'd find out I don't deserve this. One night, Mia dreamed she was on a cliff, a dark ocean below. She was scared, but a voice in the dream said, "Jump. You won't fall." She woke up heart racing, realizing it was a call from her unconscious. Mia did something crazy. She took a month's leave and joined a meditation retreat on Bainbridge Island. There she learned about Jung and individuation. She started journaling, digging into her shadow, fear of not being enough, feeling she had to live up to others' expectations. Here's the twist. At the retreat, she met Grace, a former tech exec who'd left her career to run an organic farm. Grace told Mia she'd felt the same, trapped in a life that wasn't hers. Grace said, "Your shadow isn't your enemy. It's your guide." Mia and Grace became friends, and Grace invited Mia to her Olympia farm. At the farm, Mia had a life-changing moment. One morning, picking apples in the early sunlight, she felt a peace she'd never known. She realized she didn't want to return to her tech job. She wanted something more meaningful, using her coding skills for nonprofits. She told me, "I used to think success was money and status. Now I know it's living true to my heart." Mia quit her job, moved to Olympia, and started working for an organization teaching kids to code. She said, "I didn't just find purpose. I found home." Mia's story makes me think of one last Jung idea connection. Jung believed when you live authentically, you don't just change yourself. You change the world around you. I saw this in everyone I met: Chloe, Ethan, Mia, and myself. Every time you dare face your shadow, every time you listen to your intuition, you create a ripple. That ripple touches friends, family, even strangers. Think of a time you saw someone live authentically: a friend quitting a job for their passion, a family member standing up for what they believe. It inspired you, right? That's the power of connection. So, what will you do today? Will you keep avoiding your shadow? Or will you pause, breathe, and ask, "What are you trying to tell me?" I know it's not easy. I've been there in days I doubted everything, thinking I wasn't strong enough to go on. But I promise you're stronger than you think. And you're not alone. We're a community, dreamers, facers, livers. Share your story in the comments. What problem is calling you, and what small step will you take to answer? Your story could be the light someone needs. And if you haven't subscribed, do it now. Thank you for being here. You're a changemaker, a dreamer, a light in the dark. Keep walking your path, no matter how rough. I believe in you. See you in the next video. And now, as I sit here reflecting on the journey we've shared, from my lost days in Chicago to magical synchronicities in Portland, Denver, and New York, I realize something: life isn't a puzzle to solve. It's a story to live. Carl Jung taught me that our problems, dark days, fears, moments, when the world feels like it's crumbling, aren't enemies. They're guides whispering about our true selves, urging us through the door of transformation. But to hear those whispers, you need courage. You must be willing to look at your shadow, not with shame or fear, but with curiosity and compassion. Let me share one final story, one that forced me to face myself in ways I never imagined. After Ethan's Sundance screening, I returned to Austin feeling on top of the world. My YouTube channel was growing. The podcast with Jessica inspired millions, and I thought I'd mastered my shadow. But then I got a call from my mom, Linda, in my hometown of Indianapolis. Her voice trembled as she said, "You need to come home. It's serious." My heart stopped. Mom never called like that. I booked a flight immediately, and during the flight from Austin to Indy, I couldn't stop thinking, what's happening? Am I strong enough to face it? When I arrived at our familiar red brick house in suburban Broad Ripple, Mom was at the kitchen table clutching a cold coffee mug. Her eyes red, she looked at me and said, "Your dad has cancer. Stage 4. The floor vanished beneath me. My dad, the strong man who taught me to ride a bike on Indy's streets, who laughed loudly during Colts games on Sundays, was now in a hospital fighting a battle he couldn't win. I wanted to scream, to run, to blame the world. But then I remembered Jung. I knew my shadow fear of loss, fear of not being strong enough, was rising, and this time I couldn't turn away. I spent the next weeks in the hospital, sitting by Dad, holding his hand. Those days were painful, but they were the most precious gift I've ever received. Dad shared stories I'd never heard about his youth dreams he gave up to raise a family, times he was scared but kept going. He said, "Son, don't be afraid to live true. Don't wait until it's too late." One night as I held his hand, he looked at me and said, "You've made me proud, not for your videos or podcast, but for daring to be you." That was our last talk. He passed the next morning. I thought I'd break, but instead I felt a strange strength. My shadow fear of loss didn't destroy me. It taught me to love deeper, live fiercer. Back in Austin, I started a new YouTube series sharing my journey of loss and healing. I talked about Dad, how he taught me life's meaning isn't avoiding pain, but finding light in darkness. Here's the final twist. One of those videos caught the eye of an organization in San Francisco. They invited me to speak at a major mental health conference at Moscone Center before thousands. I stood on that stage looking at the crowd and shared my story about Chicago, Chloe, Ethan, Mia, and Dad. As I finished, the room stood clapping and tears streamed down my face. Not because I'd succeeded, but because I knew my story of shadow and rebirth was touching strangers' hearts. So here's what I leave you with. Your life is a journey, and every problem you face is an invitation to become your true self. Carl Jung was right. Your shadow isn't something to fear. It's your teacher, your guide sometimes, your best friend. Think about your biggest problem right now. Maybe it's a draining job in Houston, a hurtful relationship in Boston, or a buried dream on the streets of Los Angeles. That problem isn't a dead end. It's a door. And I know opening it is scary. I've been there in nights I cried over losing Dad, in days I doubted everything. But I promise beyond that door is a version of you, stronger, truer, more alive than ever. Today, I want you to take one small step. Grab a piece of paper or open your phone's notes and write down a problem you're avoiding. Then ask, what's this problem trying to teach me? Who's it inviting me to become? Write the answer no matter how scary. Then do one small thing to honor your truth. Maybe it's saying no to something you feel pressured to do. Maybe it's signing up for a painting class in Chicago where you can paint Lake Michigan. Or maybe it's calling a friend in Seattle and saying, "I need to talk. I need to be heard." That small step is the start of transformation. And here's the last thing, you're not alone. We're a community, people daring to face the dark dream, big, live, true. Share your story in the comments. What problem is knocking at your soul, and how will you answer? Your story isn't just yours. It's a flame that can light someone else's path. If this video touched you, share it with a friend, a family member, or a stranger at your favorite Brooklyn coffee shop. And if you haven't subscribed, hit that button now, turn on notifications so we can keep this journey going together. Thank you for being here, for listening, for daring to be you. You're not just a viewer, you're a change maker, a dreamer, a light in the darkness. Keep walking your path no matter how rough. I believe in you. See you in the next video.